Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere even more dangerous than your inbox after a long weekend. Medieval castles, specifically to uncover the very real, often misunderstood lives of pretty peasant girls. Forget fairy tales, Disney hair, or romantic escapades in the moonlit rose garden. No. Tonight we're tackling what really happened to the average, not-so-royal young woman who crossed the drawbridge with more hopes than actual options. Before you get too comfortable, maybe toss a like or subscribe my way. But only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of late-night historical therapy. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you're horizontal yet. Because someone out there is absolutely stress-watching this in an office cubicle. Now, dim those lights, switch on your fan for that distant medieval wind effect, and settle in with a blanket that, ideally, is less itchy than medieval wool. This is your invitation to ask all the questions no one dared. Put in a Disney princess movie. What did pretty peasant girls actually do in castles? Was it all ballads and bouquets, or more like blisters and bunions? Has anyone ever brushed their hair? Why does every movie skip the part about soup being served tepid and possibly alive? Were there glass slippers? Or just splinters? Did anyone in the Middle Ages even use soap? Or did they just roll in hay and hope for the best? And, honestly, if you woke up tomorrow as a medieval peasant girl with cheekbones and a questionable work contract, would you last until dinner or be caught in an archery demonstration gone wrong? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1371, in the shadow of a draftier than your ex's texts, medieval castle. You're a pretty peasant girl, which means everyone has an opinion about what you're supposed to do, but no one actually asked you. Good luck. You shuffle up the muddy road, the castle looming overhead like your mother-in-law's disapproval. You're here because someone decided your looks would serve better indoors. But within 2 minutes, you discover pretty just means you get the first pick of the worst jobs. And the stones are colder than your optimism. The drawbridge clatters behind you with all the finality of a slammed car door. You expected something dramatic, maybe a welcoming trumpet, or at least a basket of bread. Instead, you get a grumpy gatekeeper with breath like old cabbage and a barked, "Keep moving." The castle itself is not the gleaming fantasy of your imagination. It's more like a stone refrigerator, permanently set to a haunted cellar. Every draft sneaks up your legs with the persistence of a bad rumor. As you enter, the smells hit you first, a confusing stew of animal, ash, and what might be boiled turnip or might be last month's disaster. Your new home, someone hands you a bucket and points to a flight of stairs that looks designed by a medieval chiropractor. You try not to slip, but the stones are slick with what you hope is only water. As you climb, you realize your prettiness comes with high expectations and zero job description. Nobody here cares about your cheekbones unless you can use them to balance a tray. Your new supervisor, the head housekeeper, sizes you up in 2 seconds. She's the kind of woman who can spot a smudged apron from 40 feet and isn't afraid to assign extra work to the fresh-faced ones. You get a quick rundown. Do what you're told, don't break anything. And if a noble calls for you, don't look them in the eye unless you're specifically told to. If you're hoping for a gentle onboarding, forget it. Medieval HR is just a stern look and a warning not to steal bread. Other servants give you the up and down. Some with curiosity. Most with the weary solidarity of people who have seen too many new faces come and go. One girl whispers, "Keep your head down and never complain about your feet." You don't get a tour, just a quick demonstration of the 3 main work zones. The kitchen, sweaty chaos. The great hall, echoes and spilled ale. And the laundry yard, where hope goes to mildew. As you settle into your first hour, it dawns on you that castle life is really just a series of cold, hard surfaces and colder, harder people. The rumor about peasant girls being chosen for their beauty? More like who can haul water fastest without fainting. You're put to work scrubbing rushes from the floor, your knees instantly freezing. Someone laughs and says, "Don't worry, you'll warm up by spring." You're not sure if they're joking. The castle is alive with noises, boots on flagstones, hounds barking, the distant clang of a blacksmith. You thought you'd be gliding through candlelit halls. Instead, you're dodging geese and noble children who have weaponized boredom. If you stand still for more than 10 seconds, you're given another task. Pretty doesn't get you out of work. It just means you get assigned, the ones that require smiling politely through exhaustion. Meal breaks? Don't count on them. The cook throws you a crust of bread and a cup of what passes for soup, grey, suspiciously lumpy, and scalding at the edges but cold in the middle. You're advised to eat quickly, because the good soup disappears faster than the patience of the head steward. And don't even think about sitting down unless someone tells you to. Chairs are for nobles, benches are for senior staff, and the rest of you are expected to perfect the art of perching awkwardly. By the time evening comes, you've learned more about yourself than you ever wanted to. Your back aches, your hands are already raw, and your face, once the thing everyone talked about, is just another tired shadow by the hearth. You wonder how many pretty girls before you thought they'd lucked out, only to find themselves knee-deep in castle mud and medieval nonsense. Turns out, life in a castle isn't about beauty at all. It's about survival, improvisation, and getting really good at pretending you can't hear someone calling your name when you're 2 flights away. And as the torchlight flickers and the castle quiets, you realize something else. You're not here to be admired. You're here to endure, to outlast the next new arrival, and maybe, just maybe, to figure out where the good bread is hidden. Welcome to castle life. Wipe your feet and lower your standards. There's no resume, only gossip and your ability to not faint at the smell of boiled cabbage. The steward sizes you up like you're a suspicious turnip, asking hard-hitting questions like, "Can you milk a goat?" and "Do you faint at the sight of blood?" Or just cry. HR would not approve. Instead of shaking hands or submitting a carefully crafted cover letter, you're handed a turnip and told to peel it without losing any fingers. This is not just a test of skill. It's an IQ test and a trust exercise rolled into one. The steward's eyes never leave your hands. Drop the turnip, and suddenly your prospects dry up faster than last year's onions. If you manage not to peel a thumb, you're already ahead of half the competition. The waiting room is just a bench outside the kitchen, where you're wedged between a snoring boy covered in chicken feathers and a woman who claims she's related to a bishop. Everyone is sizing each other up, subtly sniffing for weakness or lice. There are no references, but there is plenty of small-town gossip. In fact, most of the interview process involves the steward asking your last employer if you ever stole bread, dropped a baby, or looked shifty. The answers are rarely helpful. The only qualification that seems to matter is, will you stay if the food gets worse? Before you can even introduce yourself, the steward's next question is, can you carry a bucket of water up 3 flights without stopping? Or do you need to pray about it first? There are no polite silences, only the sounds of someone hacking up a lung in the next room. The castle's version of an aptitude test is sending you to fetch a bucket from the well. Return with it only half full, and they'll sigh like you've let down the entire feudal system. Spill any, and you're reminded that water is more valuable than you. Congratulations, you've entered the world's oldest unpaid internship. A pretty face is nice, But in the hiring hierarchy, it's somewhere below willing to touch pig intestines and didn't set anything on fire last time. The steward doesn't care about your dreams, your tragic backstory, or your mysterious parentage. He cares about whether you'll make his life easier or add to his list of daily headaches. Occasionally, he'll throw in a curveball. Can you sing a lullaby, scrub rushes, and keep secrets, preferably all at once? There's no right answer, but your reaction is noted. Then comes the practical test. You're handed a broom, a mop, or, if the mood is especially bleak, a goose that needs wrangling. If you can catch the goose, you're hired. If not, you get to chase it until everyone's entertained or you admit defeat. Sometimes the job goes to the girl with the fastest reflexes. Other times, to whoever looks least likely to run away in the night. The real interview, of course, is with the other staff. They watch from the shadows, whispering assessments that range from "she looks sturdy" to "her elbows are too pointy." The cook wants to know if you can chop onions without crying, while the laundry mistress just asks if you've ever had ringworm and, if so, whether it was contagious. If you pass these tests, meaning you don't cry, faint, or steal anything during your first hour, you're in. Signing a contract? Forget it. You're lucky to get a verbal promise and a vague gesture toward the staff quarters. Your benefits include 2 meals a day, sometimes hot, half a day off at Easter, and the strong possibility of keeping all your teeth if you don't anger the cook. Pay is mostly theoretical. Your real compensation is not getting sent home before the first snow. When the steward finally grunts his approval and tosses you a key, it feels less like a triumph and more like being handed a mop at the world's worst theme park. There's no orientation, just a stern warning. Don't spill the milk, don't talk back, and if a noble asks for you by name, run in the opposite direction unless you want to star in the next round of castle gossip. As you shuffle away, newly employed, you realize you never actually agreed to anything. The medieval hiring process is simple. You arrive, you survive, and if you're still standing after a week, you're hired. If not, well, there's always next year's turnip harvest. The other servants glance over, some jealous, some bored, all covered in varying degrees of flour and existential dread. The cook makes it clear, you're below the dog, but above the geese, and the geese have unionized. Your pretty face gets you nothing except a new nickname, you there. Your first moments in the staff quarters are less welcome party and more cautious livestock appraisal. It's like walking into a particularly judgmental bakery. The air is thick with the smell of yeast, smoke, and simmering rivalry. Someone sniffs in your direction, not in a friendly way. More like they're trying to guess if you're carrying a contagious optimism. You're introduced by first name if you're lucky, but everyone seems to prefer calling you by your most obvious trait, which tonight is new, and tomorrow will be tall one, the quiet one, or her with the elbows. There's a strict, unwritten social order here, more complicated than royal lineage and enforced with the casual ruthlessness of people who haven't had a day off since Pentecost. The head housekeeper rules with an iron ladle. The cook wields absolute power over anything edible and, by extension, anyone hoping for an extra scrap of pie. The laundry mistress is treated with a mix of fear and awe. Rumor has it, she once chased a thief out of the castle, using nothing but a wet bedsheet and her own sense of justice. Even the stable boys give you a sideways look, just in case you're about to steal their job, their boots, or their spot by the fire. Your arrival is discussed as if you can't hear every word. She won't last the week, mutters a maid polishing candlesticks with more aggression than seems strictly necessary. Did you see those shoes? Too clean. The cook, who everyone agrees was born grumpy, and only grew into it, sizes you up and assigns you to root vegetable duty. Don't chop your fingers off. The last one did, and we had to use extra onions to hide the taste. You laugh. No one else does. The first job you get is always a test, and everyone watches. You sweep, you peel, you haul water, you try not to look lost. There's always one girl who is eager to help, usually because she wants to see if you'll cry or drop a plate. By lunch, you've learned the rhythm of castle staff. Sarcastic encouragement, dry jokes, and the occasional alliance, forged in mutual loathing of the head steward. Lunch itself is a group activity, a jostling for the least soggy bread and the seat farthest from the stables. Conversation is quick, pointed, and always interrupted by a bell or a shout from the kitchen. As for the animals, you soon learn the dogs are staff in their own right, entitled to leftovers and twice the affection you'll ever get. The geese, legendary for their bad tempers, have somehow earned respect. One honks menacingly whenever you pass, as if it's seen your resume and remains unimpressed. You wonder aloud if they'll attack, and someone snorts. Just don't show fear or bread, or any sign of happiness, really. Personal boundaries are a myth. You share everything: benches, towels, work, gossip, and, sometimes, bath water. Secrets don't last an hour. If you sneeze, 3 people will have advice, and 2 will remember a cousin who sneezed just like that before her teeth all fell out. By sundown, you know who's sweet on the stable boy, who's got it out for the laundry mistress, and which noble is rumoured to have a 3rd eyebrow. Your first day is a crash course in humility and patience. By bedtime, your hair smells of onions, your feet ache, and you've had your first lesson in medieval etiquette. Never argue with the cook, always befriend the laundry mistress, and never, ever steal from the geese. You fall asleep to the sound of muffled laughter, clanking dishes, and someone snoring like a sawmill in the corner. As the castle settles, you realize the biggest secret of all. Everyone here started as you there. Survival is less about beauty and more about blending in, until it's your turn to welcome the next unlucky soul. Forget sweeping ballrooms. You're assigned everything sticky, smelly, or impossible. Scrubbing rushes, scouring pots with what is in rind, absolutely not soap, and hauling water upstairs so steep you wonder if gravity was stronger in the past. Your first lesson in castle employment is this: if it's unpleasant, you're on the rota. Anything that could ruin an outfit, a mood, or an appetite somehow falls to the pretty peasant girls, as if your symmetrical features make you immune to pain or just easier to spot when more work needs doing. The day starts before sunrise. The air so cold it feels like personal betrayal, and the only way to warm up is to keep moving, preferably while holding something heavy and leaking. Rushes are the medieval answer to carpets, except instead of plush luxury, you get piles of dried reeds, herbs, and assorted floor wildlife. Cleaning them isn't just a chore, it's an archaeological dig. Your hands numb, you kneel on the stones and rake through layers of old straw, mouse droppings, chicken feathers, and whatever last year's festival spilled. "Don't worry," says the senior maid. "If you find anything valuable, it probably belongs to the Lord. If you find anything alive, it definitely doesn't." You try not to think about the living component as you toss another suspicious handful onto the compost pile. Then it's onto the kitchen, where pots aren't so much washed as aggressively negotiated with. Soap is rare, so you're given gritty ashes, a handful of herbs, and something that might once have been a sponge, now more theoretical than functional. The residue from last night's stew has achieved a chemical bond with the pot, and your job is to scrub until your arms burn or until the cook yells, whichever comes first. You quickly realize there's a trick to every task. How to use elbow grease without destroying your elbows. How to avoid slicing your hand open on ancient cutlery. And most importantly, how to look busy when you're trying to catch your breath. Hauling water is a recurring nightmare. The castle well is always as far from the kitchens as physically possible, an architectural tradition designed purely for suffering. The buckets themselves are heavier than expected, and by the time you reach the top of the stairs, you're sloshed, soaked, and rethinking every life decision that brought you here. No matter how careful you are, water finds a way to spill. The head steward appears at just the wrong moment, sighs with disappointment, and mutters something about city girls who can't handle a little labor. You decide to accept this as a compliment. There are also the special chores, which seem to rotate among the new girls. Polishing silver with a rag so threadbare it's basically hope. Dusting tapestries you're explicitly not allowed to touch. Wiping down the Lord's prized armor, which hasn't been used in battle but collects enough dust to support its own ecosystem. Each task is somehow urgent and impossible, often at the same time. You learn fast that complaining only gets you assigned to the goose coop. The geese, by the way, are immune to beauty, immune to bribes, and allergic to mercy. Laundry is another ordeal. No warm water, no detergent, just cold river, lye, and the persistent sense that you're making things dirtier, not cleaner. Your hands become rougher by the day, your fingernails permanently ringed in grime, and your only consolation is that everyone else is in the same boat, often literally, if the laundry floats away downstream. But even the hardest work has its rhythm. Soon you can scrub, sweep, and haul on autopilot, while your mind wanders to more important matters, like whether you'll ever get the smell of onions out of your hair, or if there's a secret passage behind the pantry that leads to somewhere warm and quiet. Sometimes, when the head housekeeper's back is turned, you and the other girls share a quick joke, a wink, or a conspiratorial slice of illicit bread. In those moments, the chores seem almost bearable. Almost. By nightfall, your body aches, your clothes are as dirty as when you started, and the only thing pretty about you is your ability to survive another day of medieval multitasking. Cinderella had it easy. At least her chores ended at midnight. Yours just start again at dawn. You get issued a tunic so shapeless it could double as a tent. Shoes? If you're lucky. Otherwise, just hope your feet are tougher than the rats you share the stairwell with. Hair ribbons? Try string and wishful thinking. Welcome to the medieval world of haute couture, peasant edition. The castle doesn't care if you're pretty. It cares if you can scrub a rush mat without tripping over your own hem. The standard uniform for a peasant girl is designed for utility, not self-expression. Your tunic, made from coarse, undyed wool or linen, fits everyone and flatters no one. The cut is so generous, you could probably share it with a friend or two and still have room for a goat. There's a belt, theoretically, but it's mostly there to keep the sleeves out of the soup. You quickly discover that the tunic absorbs every possible scent the castle has to offer. After a week, it takes on a permanent bouquet of onions, wood smoke, and something vaguely agricultural. Laundry is rare, since washing means hauling your one precious outfit to the river and risking it freezing solid in winter, or getting lost in the current during spring. Most girls settle for a quick airing out on the castle wall, where it's instantly coated in dust, goose feathers, and the special medieval blend of pollen and despair. When it comes to shoes, expectations are rock bottom. If you're new, you might inherit a pair from the last girl who outgrew, outlasted, or ran away in them. These are usually clunky leather things, cracked from the cold and patched with hope. If you're unlucky, and most are, you simply wrap your feet in rags and hope you develop calluses faster than frostbite. There is a castle legend about a girl who once received an actual new pair of shoes. But the story ends with her losing one in the mud during a rainstorm and having to walk home barefoot anyway. Accessories? The castle staff take a loose interpretation of the word. Maybe you'll find a bit of cord to tie back your hair, or a bent pin for closing your tunic. Hair ribbons exist, but only in rumors and on the heads of noble ladies who float by looking ethereal and untouchable. You make do with a twist of string or, if you're feeling fancy, a strip torn from a flour sack. If it's clean, it's a special occasion. Fashion is less about looking good and more about communicating your place in the world. A clean tunic signals you're either brand new or avoiding real work. Stains are a badge of honor. Proof you spent your morning in the kitchen, the laundry, or somewhere the chickens have unionized. The only real status symbol is warmth. If you can scrounge up an extra shawl, a woolen cap, or a second-hand cloak, you're suddenly the envy of the staff dormitory. Layering isn't just for comfort, it's for survival. As for hairstyles, forget the intricate braids and coiffes of courtly maidens. You're lucky if your hair is mostly out of your eyes and not tangled with straw. Baths are rare, combs are communal, and lice are an expected part of castle life. If you want curls, you sleep with your hair twisted up in scraps of rag, but mostly you're too tired to care, and so is everyone else. There's an unspoken camaraderie among the staff about fashion disasters. You learn to laugh at each other's misfortunes. A tunic ripped on a nail, shoes left too close to the hearth and singed, a cap blown into the moat. Every mishap is a chance for dry humor, and a reminder that the only fashion rule in the castle is wear what you can, when you can, and hope it doesn't rain. When a noble woman glides past, all pearls and silk and perfect posture, there's a collective sigh. But deep down, you know she's as much a prisoner of her corset as you are of your shapeless tunic. At least your outfit, however ugly, lets you move, bend, and run, if only to avoid the head cook and her next demand. By the time the sun sets, your tunic is stained, your feet are sore, and your ribbon has been repurposed as a tourniquet for someone's bruised thumb. Still, you've survived another day's fashion follies. High fashion? Not quite. But you've mastered medieval practical chic, mud-resistant, endlessly re-wearable, and absolutely impossible to wrinkle. The once-a-month bath is a village event. Everyone gossips, the water is already grey, and you're told to scrub behind your ears in case a noble notices. The real luxury? Not freezing to death before your next wash. Bathing, in theory, is a simple affair. In practice, it's an Olympic event with far more spectators than necessary. As a pretty peasant girl, you quickly learn that clean is a relative term, and expectations are set at ankle level. You and the other staff line up in the drafty washroom, each armed with a rag, a handful of old soap shavings, and the determination of someone facing down a bucket of ice water. There's no hot tap, just tepid water drawn from the well, reheated if you're lucky, but usually cooled to Arctic lake at dawn before it even hits the tub. Privacy? Forget it. You bathe alongside the other girls, and half the village seems to have business nearby whenever someone's due for a soak. The castle's wooden tub holds memories of every bath before yours, and the water, once pristine, is soon cloudy with communal history. Someone always comments on your elbows, your hair, or your town hands. Gossip flows faster than water, and there's no such thing as a quiet soak. If you manage to wash your hair without 3 people critiquing your technique, it's a miracle. Soap is scarce. Sometimes there's a bar made from animal fat and ashes, hard as a brick, and only slightly less abrasive than the rush mats you scrub each morning. Most of the time, you make do with sand, lye, or even pungent herbs, which leave you smelling less fresh spring and more salad gone wrong. Scrubbing is not just encouraged, it's competitive. Everyone has advice on the best way to banish dirt. Use a birch twig for your back. Don't forget under your nails. And for the love of everything holy, rinse out your ears. It's less a spa day and more a public evaluation. There's a hierarchy to the bathing order, too. Senior staff go first, with the cleanest water. By the time your turn comes around, the bath is a grey, lukewarm stew. Still, it's better than nothing. The real challenge is not catching a chill afterward. The castle, built for defense and apparently against comfort, is all stone and draught. Getting from bath to bed without turning blue is a race, and the truly resourceful girls stash an extra tunic near the hearth for post-bath emergency warming. Hair care is a ritual of its own. Combs are shared, which means you're also sharing whatever lice made it through the washing. Conditioner is a myth. Detangling is accomplished with fingers and a lot of patience. Drying off requires creativity. There aren't enough towels, so you make do with strips of linen, old aprons, or just stand by the kitchen fire, rotating like bread on a spit while trying to dodge the cook's disapproving glare. Of course, not everyone is a fan of bathing. Some castle dwellers insist that washing too often is unhealthy, letting in bad airs or, worse, giving people ideas above their station. In winter, the argument is simple. Water equals frostbite. If you survive the bath, you might not survive the pneumonia that follows. Most days, personal hygiene means a quick splash to the face and a fervent hope that everyone else's sense of smell is as dulled as yours. Yet, when you do get that rare full bath, you almost feel human again. The first few moments after drying off, wrapped in a mostly clean tunic and sitting by the fire, are bliss. For a fleeting minute, you can pretend you're a princess, not just another tired, half-frozen, thoroughly gossiped about servant. And then someone throws open the door, and the cold comes rushing back in, along with a reminder that it's your turn to fetch water for the next round. In the world of medieval cleanliness, clean is a team effort, and survival means keeping your wits and your towel about you. You might not be spotless, but you're still standing. And honestly, in a world without soap, that's enough. Breakfast is bread so tough you could use it as a weapon. Lunch? Soup with floaty bits you pretend are herbs. You dream of honey but mostly eat onions. Nobles feast nearby, but your food group is brown. Mealtimes for a pretty peasant girl in a castle are less about enjoyment and more about basic survival with a side of disappointment. Each morning, you line up in the kitchens, bowl in hand, hoping the cook is in a generous mood. Breakfast is always the same, a chunk of rye or barley, bread so dense you briefly consider using it as a doorstop or, in a pinch, self-defense. If you can tear off a piece without losing a tooth, it's a good day. Sometimes there's a smear of animal fat for flavor, or a drizzle of old honey if someone's been very lucky or very sneaky in the larder. The real adventure begins at lunch. The main course is always a soup or pottage, a hot, murky concoction of whatever was found in the gardens or left over from last night. You tell yourself the floating green things are herbs, but deep down you suspect it's just more cabbage. If there's meat, it's invisible. If there's cheese, it's probably older than you. Sometimes the kitchen staff will surprise you with a wedge of hard cheese or a turnip that's only slightly squishy. But most days, your bowl is a lesson in humility and gastrointestinal resilience. The menu rarely changes, and the color palette never does. Food comes in brown, off-brown, and, on feast days, brown with flecks of grey. You become a connoisseur of texture, gritty, chewy, stringy, or simply unknown. The onions are always present, raw or boiled, and their scent becomes a sort of natural perfume that clings to your hands, your hair, and eventually, your dreams. Dessert is a foreign concept. The closest you get is a plum if it's in season, or a handful of walnuts if you're lucky enough to snag one before the mice. While you shovel down your portion in the scullery, you can hear the laughter and music drifting from the great hall. The nobles are living in an entirely different food reality. There are roast meats, candied fruits, spiced wine, and pies, so extravagant you can smell the butter halfway down the corridor. Occasionally, a sympathetic kitchen maid sneaks you a sliver of pie crust or a gnawed chicken bone. You eat it furtively, like a medieval raccoon, and then spend the rest of the day praying no one saw you. Drinks are equally underwhelming. Water is strictly for emergencies, usually murky, sometimes dangerous. Beer is the drink of choice, weak and sour, brewed for calories more than cheer. Even children drink it, because the alternative might kill you faster. On rare days, the head cook will let the staff share a cup of watered wine left over from the noble's table. You toast your good fortune with the others, and try not to think about whose cup you just used. Holidays and festivals are the real culinary highlights. One day in 20 where the staff gets scraps of meat, sweetened cakes, or a joint of something that once had fur. You eat until you're stuffed, then feel slightly sick, and return the next morning to the comforting embrace of hard bread and brown soup. Evenings are simple affairs. Another bowl of pottage or yesterday's bread. Now even harder. You eat by candlelight, surrounded by friends and enemies alike, sharing quick jokes and the occasional complaint. If you close your eyes, you can almost pretend it's a feast until you crunch down on something unexpected and realize it's just another herb. By the end of your first month, you learn the golden rule. Eat when you can, never ask what's in the stew, and befriend the cook at all costs. Because in the medieval castle, cuisine isn't about flavor, it's about survival, social hierarchy, and learning to love the taste of onions. Your bed is a straw sack that smells like last winter and possibly a cat. You sleep in a room with 5 other girls, all arguing about who snores and who stole the only decent blanket. Personal space. Try not to kick anyone in your sleep. Medieval castle staff quarters are the original open-concept living nightmare. If you were expecting a canopy bed or anything remotely resembling privacy, think again. The dormitory is a single, drafty room tucked under the eaves or wedged above the kitchen, where warmth from below is replaced by a steady stream of mysterious kitchen smells, mostly onions, sometimes bread, occasionally something that hints at despair. The air is always just a little damp, the stone walls sweating right along with you. Each girl is issued a bed, which is really just a canvas sack, stuffed with last year's straw, liberally seasoned with whatever small rodents decided to move in first. The texture is unique, lumpy, spiky, and somehow both too soft and too hard in all the wrong places. The smell is a pungent reminder that everything in the castle gets recycled, including bedding. If you're lucky, you get a spot near the fire, which means you roast until midnight and freeze by dawn when the embers die out. If you're unlucky, you're near the door, and every time someone comes in for a midnight snack or trip to the garderobe, your toes catch a draft that could strip paint. Blankets are a hot commodity, literally. There are never enough to go around. So, nightly negotiations take place with the seriousness of a diplomatic summit. Someone always claims to run hot, but still ends up hogging the thickest wool. Fights over blankets can escalate to full-out pillow wars, except the pillows are just slightly less lumpy sacks, and mostly used to protect your head from enthusiastic elbows. Snoring is inevitable. You'll learn to sleep through anything: snorts, wheezes, the rhythmic gnawing of mice in the rafters, and the distant shrieks of the castle geese changing shifts. If someone gets sick, you all get sick. Coughs and sneezes echo through the room, and the head housekeeper occasionally pops in to remind you that rest is for nobles, and tomorrow's work waits for no plague. Privacy doesn't exist. Changing clothes is a communal event, and everyone has opinions about your socks if you're lucky enough to own any. Secrets are impossible. If you write a letter, everyone will know who it's for, what it says, and why your handwriting looks suspiciously like the priest's. Anything you stash under your bed for safekeeping is fair game, unless you create a booby trap involving broken crockery and a goose feather. Nighttime in the staff dormitory is its own social ecosystem. There's always at least one girl who tells stories, half fairy tale, half gossip, all terrifying. Someone else is practicing embroidery by candlelight, muttering about dropped stitches and the evil eye. If the day's work has gone especially badly, the room is quiet except for the collective sigh of a dozen aching backs and the rustle of straw as everyone tries to get comfortable on a surface better suited for storing root vegetables. Despite the noise, the smells, and the utter lack of personal space, there's a strange comfort in this shared misery. Laughter comes easily, usually at someone else's expense, but sometimes at your own. If you wake up in the middle of the night, shivering and sore, there's a good chance someone else is awake too, ready to whisper a joke, swap a bit of bread, or just share the secret knowledge that nobody in the castle, not even the nobles, ever really sleeps well. In the morning, you rise with the sun, or with the cook's bell, whichever comes first. You shake the straw from your hair, check your shoes for spiders, and prepare to face another day. Maybe you got 3 hours of decent sleep, maybe you didn't sleep at all. Either way, you survived another medieval night, and somehow, in the company of fellow insomniacs and draft dodgers, you're ready to do it all over again. Every castle has a rumour mill louder than the bells. Pretty means you're automatically assumed to be in love with someone you've never spoken to, and if a lord so much as nods at you, your week is ruined. You learn this the hard way within your first few days. Maybe you simply pass a noble in the corridor. He glances your way, distracted, probably thinking about taxes or what's for supper, but it's enough. By dinner, every girl in the staff dorm is whispering about your secret romance. He looked right at you, they insist, as if that's a marriage proposal. Maybe you'll get a favor at the feast. You haven't even exchanged words, but already you're starring in a love story with no say in the casting. Being young and pleasant-looking makes you a magnet for other people's fantasies and anxieties. The older maids warn you about catching a nobleman's attention. It's never good news, they say. You're either a love interest or a scapegoat. Sometimes both by Friday. The scullery girls swoon over imagined courtly romances, but the laundry mistress just snorts and advises you to keep your eyes on your work and your distance from anyone with silk sleeves. If a page so much as lingers in your corner of the kitchen, he's instantly declared your special friend. If you smile at the stable boy, the rumors double in speed and detail. And then there are the real hazards. Nobles aboard, sometimes dangerously so. A pretty peasant girl is a novelty, a face they haven't seen every day since childhood, someone who still flinches when called girl instead of her actual name. Flirtation from above is rarely innocent, and more often than not, it comes with hidden traps. The ladies' maids are the first to notice. Their job is to protect their noble mistresses from scandal, and a wandering eye, yours or a lord's, is a threat to the whole household's fragile reputation. Suddenly, you're under surveillance, your every move watched and whispered about. Drop a spoon in the great hall, and half the staff will claim you did it to catch the young lord's attention. Sometimes, rumors turn into little power struggles. If the noble's wife is present, every interaction becomes a test of etiquette and invisibility. Did you curtsy correctly? Did you blush? Did you forget to look at the floor? The wrong answer means a week of extra chores, or, worse, getting transferred to the laundry where even the sunlight struggles to reach. Everyone wants to know if the Lord slipped you a coin, a smile, or, heaven help you, a flower. The truth is usually far more boring. He probably didn't even remember your name. But try convincing the kitchen staff of that. Of course, some girls lean into the attention, collecting rumors like others collect breadcrumbs. A flirtatious wink here, a carefully timed giggle there, and suddenly she's the heroine of every love story told in the staff quarters after lights out. But for most, it's a hassle, a new way to trip up, a fresh excuse for someone else's jealousy or the housekeeper's suspicion. Because in the delicate world of castle politics, pretty is less a blessing than a liability. Any hint of romance, even imaginary, is ammunition for rivals. Eventually, you master the art of rumor management. Walk quickly, laugh quietly, never linger in corridors, never smile too broadly, and if you must speak to a noble, keep it brief, polite, and as unmemorable as possible. Most importantly, never underestimate the power of the castle grapevine. If you sneeze near a squire, someone will claim you're planning an elopement by supper. Still, even with all the whispering, there's a secret amusement in the whole charade. You watch love triangles blossom and wither, alliances form and collapse, all based on nothing more than a shared glance or a found handkerchief. The real romance is reserved for story time, long after curfew, when the girls embellish and exaggerate their close encounters with nobility until the truth is as distant as a fairy tale. By the time you're done surviving the castle's romantic imagination, you know this much. In a world where dreams are rationed and reality is full of root vegetables, a rumor is as good as a holiday. Just don't let it cost you your job or your spot on the only decent blanket. You quickly learn the art of moving quickly, looking busy, and never being alone in a hallway. You invent mysterious errands and develop a sixth sense for when a noble's boots are approaching. Life as a pretty, peasant girl in a medieval castle isn't just about scrubbing pots and hauling water. It's also a high-stakes game of social hide-and-seek. You become a master at reading footsteps. A soft shuffle means another servant, but the sharp, echoing click of leather on stone, that's a noble. And it's your cue to vanish like you're auditioning for the world's most anxious magician. Forget eye contact. Your gaze is permanently glued to the nearest rush mat or dusty corner. If someone important is coming, you suddenly remember you have urgent business anywhere but here. Busy work is your best friend. At any given time, you have a basket of something, onions, linens, turnips, tucked under your arm as a kind of medieval shield. If anyone asks, you're just taking these to the pantry or fetching fresh rushes. Does the pantry actually need more onions? Irrelevant. The point is to look occupied. A stationary servant is a servant waiting for trouble, and you're not about to be caught without a prop. Your senses sharpen until you can smell trouble before it arrives. The scent of expensive perfume? Steer clear. Laughter that sounds too loud or too forced? Keep your head down. A cluster of bored squires loitering near the stairs? Detour through the kitchen, even if it means risking an extra chore from the cook. You become a human weather vane, reading the castle's shifting moods and learning to spot a storm before it breaks. Hallways, those echoing stone arteries of the castle, are the real danger zones. Being alone in a corridor with a noble is the medieval equivalent of being caught alone with your boss in the elevator, except your career can end in a far more creative variety of ways. If you have to cross one, you wait for backup. If someone is calling your name in a tone that's too sweet or too sharp, you pretend you're deaf or duck into a side room. You invent endless errands for yourself. Just on my way to the linen closet. The lady needs more candles. Has anyone seen the broom? Half the time, the errand is a ruse, but no one really keeps track as long as you look busy. There are tricks, of course. You learn to move in a group, safety in numbers, especially if you can keep the chatty new girl between you and the nearest noble. You develop a talent for blending in, walking just behind a barrel, a tapestry, or a much taller friend. In time, your body develops its own castle camouflage. Shoulders hunched, face blank, hands always in motion. The less you stand out, the safer you are. Some girls try to use humor or wit to deflect attention, but that's a gamble. The safest course is just to be forgettable, at least, to anyone in fine clothes or with an official title. If you must speak, keep it brief. If you must deliver a message, do it quickly and disappear. If you're ever cornered, there are tried and true defenses. Sudden coughing fits, possibly contagious, a mumbled apology about the cook's temper, or a frantic search for your lost apron string. Your goal is simple. Stay under the radar. In a castle full of people looking for entertainment, a pretty face is an easy target for teasing, gossip, or worse. The best compliment you can hope for is being described as reliable, quiet, or was she the tall one? Maybe. By the end of your first month, you've learned that survival isn't about being clever, funny, or even well-liked. It's about being somewhere else when trouble comes looking. After all, in a world where everyone is watching, the invisible girls sleep better and make it to breakfast. Every servant answers to someone scarier. The housekeeper can end you with a look, the cook has knives, and the lady's maid knows all your secrets before you do. It's less Downton Abbey, more Game of Thrones, minus dragons, plus extra soup. Hierarchy in a medieval castle is less about fancy titles and more about survival of the craftiest. From the moment you're hired, you realize there's an invisible web connecting every broom, spoon, and pillow in the building. At the very top is the lord and lady, of course. But as a pretty peasant girl, you'll rarely interact with them unless something has gone catastrophically wrong or you've been summoned to stand awkwardly in the background of a feast. Your daily life is ruled by the middle management of castle society. The housekeeper, or mother as some staff call her, never to her face, controls everything that isn't nailed down. She's got a memory like a steel trap and the ability to spot dust in the next county. Annoy her, and you'll be cleaning garderobes with a toothbrush for a week. Please her, and you might get first pick at the bread rations. Her stare can freeze wine, and her praise is so rare you start to think it's just a myth invented to keep hope alive. The cook, meanwhile, is the tyrant of the kitchens. She rules with a wooden spoon and the kind of authority you'd expect from a general. No one crosses her, not even the Lord Steward. She knows every secret passage, every pantry hiding spot, and how much cheese has mysteriously disappeared this month. Her knives are sharp, her tongue is sharper, and her grudges are eternal. Accidentally burn the pottage or drop a tray, and you'll be assigned to potato peeling purgatory for days. Befriend her, and you may find an extra crust of pie slipped your way on festival days, an honor akin to being knighted. Then there's the lady's maid, who floats through the halls with the power and poise of a chess grandmaster. She's heard every piece of gossip before it hits the grapevine and can spot a missing hair ribbon at 50 paces. Her approval matters more than you'd think. one word from her, and your reputation in the servants' quarters rises or sinks. She's also the unofficial therapist, marriage counselor, and sometimes, terrifyingly, the head of internal investigations when something goes missing from the lady's wardrobe. The butler, if the castle has one, presides over the cellar and all things liquid. He's the only person who moves between the noble's table and the staff hall with ease, a walking ledger book of everyone's faults and favorite wines. If you're polite and useful, he might turn a blind eye to an extra ladle of ale. Otherwise, expect your chores to triple whenever the wine runs low. Below this upper tier are the specialists. The laundry mistress is feared for her ability to detect stains at a molecular level and her devotion to public humiliation as a teaching tool. The stable master is gruff but fair, mostly because he likes horses better than people. The scullery maids, new girls, and kitchen boys make up the foot soldiers, expected to do everything, be everywhere, and blend in, and, of course, the geese. Not officially on the payroll, but somehow always involved in disciplinary action. Within this tangled system, everyone is watching everyone else. Make a friend, and you have an ally. Make an enemy, and you'll find your shoes stuffed with rushes, or your name suspiciously absent from the festival day work schedule. Gossip travels fast, alliances shift quicker, and every mistake is a lesson for the next new girl. You learn fast. Smile at the right moments. Keep your head down, and always know who's watching. It isn't just about doing your job. It's about survival. In the castle, the hierarchy isn't written down, but you feel it every time you pick up a broom, and if you ever forget, someone is always ready to remind you, with or without soup. Alliances form fast. Today's best friend is tomorrow's rival. You bond over misery, share scandalous stories, and occasionally smuggle each other extra bread crusts like it's a high-stakes heist. Castle life as a pretty peasant girl is as much about social strategy as it is about scrubbing pots. On your first morning, you're thrown into a room full of strangers who quickly become your co-workers, roommates, therapists, frenemies, and sometimes accidental co-conspirators. In this world, the line between friendship and rivalry is as thin as the porridge at breakfast. One day, you're giggling together while folding laundry. The next, you're on opposite sides of a kitchen brawl over who stole whose shift near the hearth. Friendship here is forged in fire, literally, sometimes. If the cook's temper gets the better of her, you build quick bonds with the girls who work alongside you, swapping horror stories about impossible chores, nightmare nobles, and who got splashed with the moat water today. There's an unspoken rule. If you have an extra crust of bread, you slip it to the girl who got stuck hauling water. If you hear a juicy piece of gossip, you trade it for a secret, a comb, or a quick cover while you sneak off for a forbidden nap. You know everyone's real age, their best lie, and what scares them more than the housekeeper's glare. But trust is a limited currency. The staff dormitory is a medieval microcosm of alliances and shifting loyalties. It only takes one overheard whisper, one accidental spill of gravy, or one rumor about a noble's wandering eye to flip today's friend into tomorrow's nemesis. Rivalries are inevitable. Maybe she gets picked to carry the festival flowers instead of you. Maybe you get blamed for her broken pitcher. Maybe someone claims you borrowed her shoes, which, in castle terms, is an act of war. There are the harmless rivalries, solved by a pillow fight or a cold shoulder. Then there are the slow-burning feuds, passed down from one generation of servants to the next. Who stole whose place by the fire, who sabotaged the pottage, who forgot to wake everyone up before the housekeeper's rounds. Sometimes it feels like the castle runs on drama as much as it does on turnips. Still, True friends are worth their weight in onions. You help each other out of trouble, swap chores to cover for a sick friend, and combine forces to survive inspection day. You share combs, hair ribbons, or what passes for them, and the kind of advice only someone who's lived through a lice outbreak can offer. In the quiet moments before bed, you swap stories, some true, some wild exaggerations, about escaping to a better life, about catching a noble's eye, the good kind, not the more chores kind, or about running away with a troop of travelling minstrels. Then, inevitably, comes the castle grapevine. Secrets travel at lightning speed, even when no one is talking. Someone's missing, and within minutes, everyone knows she's got a fever, or is in the kitchen, weeping over spilled milk. You learn the art of selective honesty. Tell enough to stay in the loop, but never everything. If you're wise, you cultivate a reputation for being trustworthy, but not gullible. If you're foolish, you'll end up the center of the next scandal, whether you did anything or not. Every so often, the peasant girl politics spill over into something bigger, a united front against a particularly cranky steward, a last-minute rescue mission to retrieve someone's favorite shawl, a covert rebellion to liberate an extra apple from the noble's table. In these moments, you realize the real power of friendship isn't just surviving together, but the shared laughter and small victories that make the endless work bearable. So, in the end, castle life teaches you this. Choose your allies wisely, forgive easily, and never underestimate the value of a well-timed bread crust. Because here, your best asset isn't your face, it's your friends, and the occasional enemy who keeps things interesting. On holidays, the castle erupts with music, meat, and the annual risk of setting your hair on fire with a candle. For a few hours, even the servants dance. Just don't spill wine on a noble, or you're scrubbing the great hall with a toothbrush. If toothbrushes existed, for weeks before a festival, the castle is buzzing with anticipation and anxiety. Peasant girls whisper about what scraps of meat might be left, whether there will be a performance in the great hall, and if last year's incident with the juggler and the roast goose will finally be topped. Work, which is already endless, doubles. Tables must be scrubbed until they reflect the torchlight, even if they're made of wood. Rushes are replaced, and windows, yes, those glassless drafty holes, are wiped down as if it will make a difference. You're assigned to help decorate. Hanging garlands made of last year's dried flowers and fresh-picked greens, sweeping the main hall a dozen times, and trying to avoid the stable boys who always seem to accidentally drop a bucket of slop right where you're walking. Your hands are chapped from polishing, your hair is dusted with flour from helping in the kitchens, and your one decent tunic is now splattered with beet juice. But spirits run high, because for once, there's music drifting through the castle instead of just orders and complaints. The nobles go all out, dressed in silk and brocade, hair oiled and perfumed, rings flashing as they toss coins to the minstrels. The feast is a spectacle. Steaming platters of roast boar, glazed apples, pies as big as your head, and honey cakes dripping with syrup. The smell is intoxicating, and your stomach aches with longing, even as you ferry trenchers and wipe up spilled ale. If you're lucky, the cook slips you a bit of cheese or a handful of grapes, contraband delicacies to be hidden away for later, savoured in the corner like the world's most illicit treasure. For a few magical hours, work slows. A fiddler saws away in the gallery, dancers swirl in circles, and the laughter is so loud you almost forget your aching feet. Someone produces a drum, a visiting bard recites a poem, and even the Lord's hunting hounds get their share of scraps and attention. The servants are allowed to join in, Briefly, you and the other girls giggle to your way through a clumsy round dance, ducking under garlands, hair loose and cheeks flushed from stolen sips of watered wine. It's chaos, but for once, it's the good kind. There's always the risk, though, of a festival mishap. Candles drip wax onto someone's sleeve. A tipsy squire upends a jug of ale onto your freshly washed feet. A goose, because there's always a goose, breaks free and leads a parade through the great hall, leaving a trail of feathers and indignation in its wake. The nobles find these disasters hilarious. The servants? Not so much. You know the post-festival cleanup will last for days. And any mistake made in the chaos, whether it's a shattered plate or a wine stain on the Lord's doublet, will be remembered until the next festival, and maybe the one after that. When the feast ends, you help clear away the wreckage, stacking trenches, sweeping up confetti, and pretending not to see the kitchen boy sneak the last tart. The fire dies down, the music fades, and reality creeps back in with the dawn chill. You drag yourself to bed, feet throbbing, head buzzing with snatches of song and the sweet, impossible hope that next year, maybe, you'll dance first and scrub second. But even with all the extra work, the chaos, and the inevitable punishment for any servant who enjoyed herself a bit too much, festival days matter. They break up the monotony, spark new stories, and let you remember, if only for a night, what it feels like to laugh until your sides hurt and dance until you forget about calluses and chores. It's the illusion of fun, but for now that's enough. Occasionally you get called up to help the noble ladies. Think medieval internship. Your new duties: lacing corsets, carrying perfumes, and pretending not to notice the marital drama that would make reality TV jealous. The summons usually comes without warning. One moment you're elbow deep in laundry, the next you're whisked away by a sharp-eyed chamberlain who says, "You, yes, you." The one with the steady hands. The lady needs assistance. You smooth your tunic. Do your best to flatten your hair with spit and hope, and pray that you don't trip over the hem as you enter the noblewoman's solar. Welcome to a whole new world of delicate fabrics, breath-holding etiquette, and conversational minefields. Your first lesson? Don't touch anything unless instructed. Noble women's chambers are treasure troves of velvet cushions, embroidered tapestries, and delicate combs, each one worth more than your yearly wages. The perfume bottles alone are guarded like holy relics, and the lady's favorite comb is the stuff of legend and frequent panic when misplaced. Your main job is to be useful, invisible, and quiet, all at the same time. Speak only when spoken to, move only when directed, and for heaven's sake, never drop the hairpins. Dressing a lady is a team sport, full of whispered instructions and the occasional silent scream corsets need. Tightening, a two-person operation that involves more teamwork than a tug-of-war. You learn quickly that tighter means until she can't breathe but looks spectacular. The noblewoman expects efficiency and tact, but mostly, she expects you to understand her moods before she's finished her first cup of rosewater. If she sighs, you offer the green dress, not the blue one. If her eyebrow arches, you swap perfumes. It's an emotional weather system, and you're the umbrella. Meanwhile, the gossip flows as freely as the rosewater. The lady's maid knows everyone's secrets, who's feuding with whom, who's fallen from favor, who may or may not be expecting a miracle before the wedding date. As a temporary member of this inner circle, you're expected to hear everything and remember nothing. The most important skill isn't sewing or hair braiding. It's the ability to keep a straight face when the noblewoman launches into a rant about her husband's hunting trips or the latest scandalous bardic ballad making the rounds. You might get sent to fetch a message for the lady's sister, discreetly, of course, as the last girl who dropped the wrong note ended up darning socks until Lent. Or you're asked to help organize a jewelry box, which is really just an excuse for the lady to complain about the size of her emeralds compared to her cousins. Your reward for surviving the morning's chaos? The chance to stand perfectly still during a 3-hour hair-braiding marathon, punctuated only by the lady's pointed comments about her rival's excessively shiny curls. The flip side to all this elegance is a front-row seat to castle drama. Husbands storm in and out. Children throw tantrums over pearls. Marriage proposals are discussed, dissected, and dismissed with a flick of a lace handkerchief. Sometimes, the lady confides in you, not because she trusts you, but because you're there, and the furniture isn't legally allowed to answer back. You learn to nod, look sympathetic, and never, ever repeat what you hear. By the end of the day, your hands are trembling from too tight corsets and nerves. You slip back to the servants' hall, dizzy from perfume and secrets, carrying with you the silent knowledge that you survived another shift in the world's most dramatic dressing room. You're not sure if you'll ever be called up again, but one thing's certain: there's never a dull moment when your lady's maid for a day. And if you're lucky, you'll be back in the kitchen tomorrow, where the drama is mostly about onions, not emeralds. Feel a sniffle? Too bad. You get onion poultices, a prayer, and instructions to keep working. Cough too loudly, and the priest starts muttering about demons. There is no paid time off, unless you count unconsciousness. In a medieval castle, falling ill is like falling behind in a race where the only prize is survival. The first sign of sickness: a runny nose, a suspicious rash, a cough that sounds like a donkey in distress, is met with a mix of horror and resignation. There's no sick bay, no friendly nurse, and definitely no sympathy from the head housekeeper. If you're upright, you're working. If you're not upright, you'd better be quiet about it. Because the last thing anyone wants is to catch whatever you've brought to the party. Medicine in the castle is a hodgepodge of old wives' tales, faith, and a heroic amount of denial. The staff healer, a woman with more wrinkles than teeth, and a personal vendetta against drafts, arrives with a pouch of herbs and a look that says, "I've seen worse." Her treatments range from the plausible elderflower tea for fevers, to the questionable slug slime for boils, to the outright terrifying bloodletting with a knife that looks suspiciously rusty. The favorite cure-all is the onion poultice, a hot, weepy mess slathered on your chest or feet, guaranteed to make you smell so bad no one stands close enough to catch your illness. If things get really dire, you might get a leech, because nothing says healing like a small, hungry worm sucking your blood while the local priest recites psalms in the corner. If your fever doesn't break, the next step is a prayer circle, where your co-workers gather to light a candle and debate whether your cough is a sign of bad humors or the result of last week's suspiciously undercooked stew. Either way, you're reminded to confess your sins, just in case. Rest is more of a theoretical concept. The castle's definition of a sick day is to let you peel half as many turnips and collapse by the fire in the kitchen instead of on your straw mattress. If your illness is visible, think swollen eyes, mysterious spots, or the kind of pallor usually reserved for ghosts. The priest will arrive, muttering about unclean spirits and the need for more prayers and fewer onions. Your friends bring you scraps of bread and the latest gossip, which at least keeps your spirits up, even if your body isn't cooperating. Serious illness, though, is another story. If you're truly unwell, the household goes into a quiet panic. Nobody wants to be blamed for bringing plague to the castle. You might be quarantined, aka sent to the dampest corner of the cellar with a single blanket and strict instructions not to die where anyone will trip over you. Sometimes the noble family arranges for an actual physician, but his treatments are as likely to harm as help. The medieval doctor's kit includes such hits as forced vomiting, purging with mysterious powders, and the ever-popular suggestion to bleed it out. The best-case scenario? Your fever breaks, and you live to work another day. Worst case? You become a cautionary tale, and your best friend inherits your slightly less lumpy straw bed. If, miraculously, you recover, you're expected to leap right back into full duty, usually with a polite reminder to try not to cough on the bread. There's no follow-up, no convalescence, and certainly no free pass to the easier chores. You might get a nod of respect from the laundry mistress. Surviving a castle cold is considered a minor miracle, but more often you get a new round of side-eye from anyone who thinks you might still be contagious. In short, medieval medicine is equal parts hope, superstition, and stubbornness. If you're lucky, you heal. If you're unlucky, you learn to keep quiet about it. Either way, one thing is certain. In a world without Tylenol or sick leave, your greatest asset is your ability to keep moving, even if you're doing it with a raw onion tied to your foot. Information is currency. You know who's sneaking out after curfew, who broke the Lord's favorite goblet, and which stable boy might actually be a runaway prince. He's not, he just has good hair. In the castle, there's no such thing as privacy, and secrets travel faster than the cook's temper. The castle walls may be thick, but sound seems to seep through every stone, and so does curiosity. For a pretty peasant girl, gossip isn't just entertainment, it's a survival strategy, a form of protection, and sometimes your best shot at getting ahead, or at least not getting left behind. The grapevine begins in the kitchen, where bread dough and rumors are kneaded side by side. While you're peeling onions or scrubbing pots, you hear whispers about the Lord's midnight visitor, the lady's new velvet slippers, and who got caught snoring during prayers. The castle laundry is another hub of intrigue. What better place to spot suspicious stains, hidden love notes, or missing rings than among the sheets? Even the cold, echoing corridors are alive with the foot traffic of information. The kitchen boys and laundry maids may seem harmless, but their ears are sharper than the housekeeper's glare. Not all gossip is equal. Some tidbits are gold. Knowing when the head cook will be away means a chance to sneak an extra crust of pie. Other secrets are cautionary tales. Who got caught in the wine cellar? Who's in trouble with the priest? Who's hiding a goose in the dormitory? Don't ask. Everyone has something to trade. A tip about the steward's mood, a warning about the housekeeper's patrol, or the latest speculation about which visiting noble is looking for a wife. The best gossips are invisible. You learn to blend in, to ask innocent questions, to laugh at the right moments, while tucking away the useful bits for later. Drop the wrong word in the wrong ear, though, and you could find yourself the subject of tomorrow's scandal. If a rumor turns sour, say, someone accuses you of borrowing a lady's comb or being too friendly with a page, you'll spend weeks trying to clear your name, scrubbing extra floors and defending yourself in the unofficial court of staff opinion. Rumors aren't just idle chatter. They're power. A well-timed whisper can warn you away from disaster or land you in the thick of it. Maybe you learn which noble to avoid because he's got a reputation for pinching more than cheeks. Maybe you hear that the steward is furious about missing silverware and can hide your own cutlery before he comes snooping. You even pick up survival tips. How to sneak a nap during Mass. How to trade kitchen scraps for a borrowed shawl. Or how to dodge extra chores by volunteering elsewhere. There are, of course, the wild stories. Like the one about the scullery maid who married a prince in disguise, or the kitchen cat who is supposedly the reincarnation of a wronged baron. These tales grow with every retelling, until the truth is unrecognizable and everyone's laughing too hard to care. You learn that sometimes it's best not to correct the record. After all, a little fantasy helps make the endless work go faster. At night, as you settle into your straw mattress, you and the other girls whisper the latest headlines in the dim candlelight. Some stories are silly, some a little dangerous, but all of them bind you together. A secret network of watchers, listeners, and survivors. Tomorrow, the news cycle starts all over again, and you'll be ready. Ears open and stories at the ready. Because in the medieval castle, knowledge is the only currency that never runs out. Every month, someone sets the kitchen on fire, the moat overflows, or the geese revolt. As the designated pretty one, you're always sent to charm the visiting bishop or apologize to the cook. Disaster in the castle is never just a possibility. It's a tradition. If the stone walls could talk, they'd sound like a disaster preparedness manual, only less reassuring. The kitchen is the most dangerous room in the building, packed with open flames, boiling pots, slippery floors, and people running on nothing but stubbornness and weak ale. At least once a month, a careless hand or a stray log turns the hearth into a firestorm. Someone yells, "Water!" but all you have is beer, and the closest bucket is being used as a stool by the scullery boy. Your job? Look innocent and try not to catch your hair on fire. Again, when the flames are finally beaten back with a combination of wet rags, screaming, and desperate prayer, you're sent to smooth things over. As the pretty one, you're nominated to face the bishop, who's come to bless the feast, but instead finds himself dodging smoke and clutching his hat. You're instructed to apologize for the unexpected pyrotechnics and offer him an extra hunk of bread, all while keeping a straight face as he wipes ash from his robes. You wonder if there's a patron saint for surviving embarrassment. Water, meant to be your friend, has other ideas. Heavy rain can turn the moat into a river, and sometimes that river decides it wants a tour of the lower kitchens. At the first sign of a leak, everyone scrambles to pile sacks by the door and move the pantry supplies to higher ground, usually the stairs. When the moat floods, you're wading through knee-deep, icy water, trying to rescue barrels of turnips while a duck swims past looking more comfortable than you've ever felt in your life. And then there are the geese. Medieval castles are notorious for their livestock. But geese are in a league of their own, loud, territorial, and smarter than some of the kitchen staff. When the geese decide to revolt, usually during lunch, chaos erupts. Feathers fly, girls shriek, and someone always gets chased down the hallway, pursued by a particularly angry gander. The cook threatens goose stew every time, but no one's ever been brave enough to try to catch one. The geese always win. Other disasters come in variety packs. The time the main stair collapsed during festival prep, and the Lord's new velvet was ruined. The winter when a chimney backed up, filling the entire hall with smoke and sending everyone, noble and servant alike, coughing into the courtyard. Once, lightning struck the bell tower, and the only thing louder than the thunder was the collective panic of the staff racing to save the prayer books from getting soaked. Of course, every time disaster strikes, the pretty girls are sent to negotiate, either calming the nobles, apologizing to the visitors, or pleading with the kitchen staff not to quit. Sometimes, your only real skill is looking harmless while offering a sooty loaf of bread and repeating, "It's never usually like this," even though it's always like this. But here's the strange comfort. Disasters bring everyone together. For a few moments, everyone's on the same side, fighting fire, flood, or feathered mayhem. You swap stories of past chaos while cleaning up. and every retelling makes the event a little less frightening and a little more hilarious. By the time the embers are out and the feathers are swept up, you're exhausted, but you've earned another badge in the ongoing, never-ending survival game that is castle life. Disaster is never the end. It's just another chapter in the Peasant's wild, ridiculous, and weirdly communal story you'll tell the next time someone drops a candle or pokes a goose. The castle chapel is where you confess to wanting to throttle your supervisor. Everyone is a little superstitious. You light a candle for luck, mostly hoping your next meal isn't still moving. Religion in the medieval castle is less about quiet reflection and more about never missing a beat in the endless dance of ritual and routine. From the moment the bells ring at sunrise, faith is woven into your day, sometimes gently, more often like an itchy seam in your only tunic. You might not understand every Latin word the priest shouts, but you understand this much. Being seen in chapel is just as important as being seen in the kitchen, and sometimes it's the only way to earn a few moments of actual peace. Each morning, you trudge into the chilly chapel alongside the other servants, your breath rising in little clouds as you settle onto a hard bench. The space is dim, flickering with candlelight, and filled with the faint scent of wax, old wood, and whatever dried flowers survived the last festival. The priest launches into the daily prayers with impressive volume, making sure even the sleepiest scullery maid is fully awake before he's halfway through the Pater Noster. You cross yourself, bow at the right moments, and try not to yawn too obviously. Superstition is everywhere. Someone sneezes during the prayers? Bad omen. Candle sputters? Definitely rain coming. And probably bad luck for laundry day. The older staff take all rituals seriously. The cook has a habit of crossing herself 3 times before kneading bread, just in case. And you'd never dream of beginning a new chore without a whispered plea for success, or at least, no disasters. Lighting a candle is as much about warding off food poisoning as it is about spiritual devotion. Confession is another weekly event. The priest sits in a drafty corner of the chapel, and each servant takes a turn unburdening themselves. You confess to the usual: small thefts, an extra apple, unkind thoughts about nearly everyone, and that one time you dropped a crust of bread and then picked it up and ate it anyway. The real sins, anger, envy, wishing for a different life, are harder to admit, so you wrap them up in vague promises to try harder. The priest nods wisely, prescribes a few prayers or maybe an extra candle, and sends you back to your chores, lighter only in conscience. On feast days, religious duties double. The whole castle is expected to attend Mass, and you might spend the entire morning preparing the chapel, polishing candlesticks, sweeping the floors, and arranging what passes for flowers in whatever vessels are clean. After the service, the noble family processes out, trailed by servants who are just hoping there's leftover bread at the end of all this piety. The priest blesses everything from the Lord's hounds to the laundry baskets, sometimes both at once. Sometimes, penance is a group activity. If a disaster strikes, a kitchen fire, a broken goblet, or a suspected curse, the whole staff might be called to pray for forgiveness. You kneel, stiff-backed and sore, offering up your aches to the greater good. Afterward, there's always a little relief. Maybe it worked. Maybe the worst is over. Or maybe you'll just be back here next week, confessing that you rolled your eyes during the blessing of the onions. But for all its demands, religious duty offers something rare in castle life: a sense of rhythm, a breath between endless chores, and an excuse to pause, even if only for a moment. It's a space where you can hope, reflect, or just quietly plot your escape to a life with fewer prayers and more blankets. Faith here isn't about miracles. It's about making it to the end of another day. Candles lit and supper mostly safe. And maybe, just maybe, a little grace to get through tomorrow. Nobles feast and laugh. You refill goblets and try not to get trampled during the post-dinner boar chase. Once a month, a wandering bard arrives. He smells worse than the stable, but at least it's a new story. If you thought castle life was all toil and no play, you'd only be half right. The medieval idea of entertainment is a wild spectrum, ranging from grand spectacles to slightly suspicious diversions, all orchestrated under flickering torchlight and the occasional aroma of burning fat. As a pretty peasant girl, you see it all. The chaos in the great hall, the squabbles backstage, and the very real risk of being dragged into a dancing line against your will. Feasts are the main event. Nobles gather in their finery. Tables groaning with meats, pies, and glazed fruits, while you and the other servants form an efficient human river, ferrying trenchers, wine, and roasted animals. Your job is to move fast, keep your head down, and pray you don't spill red wine on the Lord's new tunic. The laughter is so loud, it rattles the windows. Musicians pluck out lively tunes. The fiddler saws away with gusto. And if the evening is especially rowdy, there's a good chance someone will fall off a bench. Not always a noble. Once the meal is finished and the last bones have been tossed to the hounds, the real chaos begins. Entertainment for the upper class means wild dancing, circle reels, clapping games, and the boar chase, a ritual involving a fake pig, an overeager squire, and at least 3 chairs being broken. Your job? Dodge elbows, and stay clear of flying trenchers. Every so often, a tipsy noble grabs a servant for a spin around the hall. You smile politely, keep your feet out of harm's way, and pray you won't be the next story for the staff to laugh about. Then there's the bard. Every month or so, a wandering storyteller shows up with a battered lute and a repertoire of songs, poems, and tales of improbable dragons. He's paid in bread, ale, and the privilege of sleeping in the warm corner of the kitchen. His stories are half truth, half nonsense. But everyone listens. Nobles for the novelty, servants for the distraction, children for the magic. You learn to appreciate his tales about clever maidens and foolish knights, even as you wonder how many times he's recycled the same plot with different names. The castle is never short of impromptu entertainment. Sometimes, a pair of squires duel in the courtyard with sticks while the maids place bets. On rainy evenings, the kitchen girls invent their own games. Riddles, clapping songs, or the ever-popular guess what's in the stew. Nobody ever gets it right, and sometimes it's better not to know. At festivals, the excitement turns up a notch. Jugglers tumble through the great hall. Fire eaters wow the crowd, and you do your best to hide from the mime who wants to involve the servants in his act. Not all entertainment is welcome, of course. Sometimes the fun is watching the steward lecture a clumsy page, or seeing who can last the longest without laughing during a particularly tedious sermon. Once, the Lord's hunting falcon got loose and sent half the hall diving under tables. The laughter that followed was the purest joy you'd heard in months. Mainly because, for once, it wasn't at your expense. Despite the noise and chaos, these moments of entertainment are a reminder that medieval life isn't all hardship. There's laughter, music, and the strange camaraderie that comes from sharing both the highs and the lows. You find yourself humming a bard's tune as you scrub pots or recounting the latest feast's disasters while fixing your hair. For a few brief hours, everyone, noble and servant, comes together in the ancient art of simply having a good time. And if you faint from exhaustion, at least it's in the middle of a good story. drafts cut through the walls like your aunt's sarcasm. Winter means chapped skin. Summer means sunburn. Rain finds its way in no matter what. And your one dry spot is always occupied by the cat. As a pretty peasant girl in a medieval castle, the weather is your constant companion, tormentor, and, sometimes, your only excuse to stand still for a minute by the fire. You quickly learn that the castle's defences, built to keep out armies, are no match for a determined February wind. Cold air sneaks through the arrow slits, up the stairs, and under your blankets. You wake each morning convinced your nose has frozen solid. If you're lucky enough to have socks, they're still damp from the day before. If not, you just shuffle around, hoping your feet eventually go numb. Winter is a 6-month campaign against the elements. The fireplaces help, but only if you're standing close enough to risk singed hair or a lecture from the cook. Otherwise, you huddle with the other girls under a shared blanket, shoulders pressed together for warmth and mutual misery. Your hands are always raw, your lips cracked, and your cheeks stung red from icy winds. The water buckets freeze solid before you get back to the kitchen, and the laundry, when it's finally dry, feels like it's made of thin glass. The best part? The cats and dogs always find the warmest spot first. That one dry, sunny patch by the hearth, occupied by the kitchen cat, curled up and glaring at you as if daring you to try and move her. The rest of the staff know better. Disturb the cat and risk years of bad luck and mysterious puddles in your shoes. Then comes spring, and with it, hope and mud. The snow melts into puddles. The paths turn to slippery rivers, and the castle's stone steps become an obstacle course. No one's immune to the slip and slide of early mornings, especially not when carrying buckets of water or trays of food. The only thing worse than wet feet is knowing you'll have to go out again tomorrow. Summer should be a relief, but it's just another test of endurance. The thick stone walls trap heat like an oven, and the air inside becomes stuffy, sticky, and alive with the buzz of flies. You sweat through your linen tunic and dream of cool streams, then remember that bathing is still a monthly event. If you're on kitchen duty, the heat is even worse. Flames roar from the hearth, stews bubble endlessly, and the only refreshment is a stolen sip of lukewarm beer. Sunburns are common, especially for anyone unlucky enough to work outside in the gardens or laundry yard. The one upside? You don't have to worry about your tunic freezing while it's drying. Now it just comes back sun-bleached and slightly crunchy. Autumn gives a brief, beautiful respite. The air turns crisp. Apples and pears appear on the menu, and you get a few precious days where your clothes aren't either sopping wet or plastered to your skin. You gather firewood, air out the straw mattresses, and enjoy the fleeting comfort of a warm cloak before the cold creeps back in. No matter the season, the weather is a shared hardship, a topic of endless conversation, complaint, and camaraderie. You and the other girls invent games about who can spot the next leak, place bets on when the roof will finally give in, and, on the worst days, just sit together and laugh at the absurdity of it all. In the castle, everyone, from nobles to kitchen maids, wages the same, losing battle against the elements. And as you finally crawl into your straw bed, shivering or sweating or just vaguely damp, you know the weather will be waiting for you tomorrow, ready to keep you humble, resourceful, and just a little bit tougher than the day before. Chickens roost in the stairs, cats sleep on your face, and there's a goose with more seniority than you. You dodge droppings on your way to work and hope the kitchen dog doesn't steal your dinner. Living in a medieval castle means sharing your space with more animals than people, and the animals always seem to get the best spots. Every corner of the building is alive with something that clucks, squeaks, purrs, or occasionally honks. You start your morning tiptoeing past the hen who's laid claim to the bottom step, giving her a wide berth because everyone knows she's pecked 3 girls already this week. Chickens are everywhere. On windowsills, under benches, even nestled among the rushes on the floor, popping out unexpectedly when you're half asleep and just trying to get to the privy. The castle cats, meanwhile, run their own kingdom. They've figured out which beds are warmest, which maids have the softest laps, and which kitchen scraps are most worth begging for. At night, you're likely to wake up with a tabby sprawled across your neck or a kitten batting at your hair, purring so loudly it drowns out the snores. If a cat claims your bed, you sleep around her. That's just how it works. There's even a rumor that the oldest cat is immortal and once bit a noble for disturbing her afternoon nap. The geese are the real power brokers. Ostensibly, they belong in the yard, but they have a talent for sneaking indoors and parading through the halls like they own the place. There's one ancient, cantankerous gander who everyone insists has been on staff longer than the steward. He guards the pantry door, hisses at the cook, and has single-handedly ruined more feasts than bad weather. You learn quickly: never meet a goose's gaze, and never, ever leave your bread unattended. Dogs are technically working animals, kept for hunting, herding, or protecting the noble family, but you suspect they're mostly around for morale. The kitchen dog, a scruffy beast with an appetite for shoes and unattended meat pies, naps by the fire all day and is universally adored. Except when he steals your lunch, which is often, no one blames him. If you catch him with a sausage, you just sigh and find something else to eat. The dogs are the only creatures allowed at the noble table, where they beg shamelessly and occasionally sneak a nap under the Lord's feet during dinner. Rats and mice are the ever-present, uninvited guests. You spot them darting along the walls, hear them in the rushes at night, and sometimes find them nibbling the bread before you do. The cats do their best, but even they can't keep up with the steady supply. In a pinch, everyone learns to hang their food from the rafters and check shoes for surprises before slipping them on. Occasionally, the livestock situation escalates. Sheep might be brought in during a storm, piglets escape the yard and end up in the laundry, or the Lord's prized falcon gets loose and sends everyone diving under tables. When this happens, the whole castle mobilizes: maids, stable boys, even the cook, each person assigned to catch, calm, or simply not get trampled by whatever four-legged or feathered crisis is unfolding. Despite the chaos, there's something oddly comforting about all these animal encounters. The livestock are part of the castle's heartbeat, their routines as steady and reliable as the tolling of the church bell. In a life full of uncertainty, animals are a source of warmth, laughter, and the occasional stolen dinner roll. You fall asleep each night to a symphony of animal sounds, knowing that tomorrow's breakfast may be interrupted by a chicken, a cat, or a goose with an agenda. It's not glamorous, but it's never lonely, and at least if you talk to yourself, you can always pretend you were just addressing the dog. You dream of promotion, but promotion means different chores and, occasionally, less soup. Punishment? Cleaning the privies. You question every career decision, and you've only been here 3 weeks. The idea of upward mobility in a medieval castle is a lot like trying to climb a greased ladder while someone throws turnips at you from above. When you first arrive, you imagine that working hard and keeping your nose clean might eventually earn you a spot as head housekeeper, or even, if you're really ambitious, the noble lady's maid. The reality? Promotion mostly means someone else has quit, been married off, or come down with an illness, and now you're the lucky soul chosen to do her work on top of your own. The process is rarely formal. There are no meetings, no handshakes, and certainly no pay raise. One morning you might be scouring pots and, after lunch, find yourself supervising the new girl as she fails to scrub rushes to the head cook's satisfaction. Maybe you're trusted to carry messages for the steward, fetch water for the chapel, or serve bread at the noble's table. A high honor, unless you drop the loaf, in which case it's a direct ticket back to kitchen duty. Your fellow servants may pretend to be happy for you, but there's always a hint of jealousy. After all, any promotion could mean you get first pick of the meager supper, or at least your own corner of the straw mattress. With promotion, however, comes the avalanche of new responsibilities. Supervising means you're now the target for every complaint, every stubbed toe, every she stole my hair ribbon drama that crops up in a room full of exhausted teenagers. If anything goes wrong, it's your fault. If things go right, the housekeeper takes the credit. You quickly realize that climbing the castle ladder just means the ladder is now your responsibility if it breaks. On the flip side, punishment is swift and creative. Step out of line, break a dish, or answer back to the wrong person, and you'll find yourself assigned the worst tasks in the castle's impressive repertoire of misery. Cleaning the privies, essentially the medieval version of plumbing, requires bravery, a strong stomach, and a willingness to accept that dignity is a luxury item. You spend hours hauling waste buckets, scrubbing stone holes, and praying you don't slip on something unspeakable. The only upside is that once you survive, you're immune to most other forms of humiliation. Sometimes the punishments are more subtle. You might be forgotten at mealtime, assigned to stir the pottage until your arms ache, or banished to the laundry yard in winter, where your hands freeze and your only company is the angry geese. These lessons are never written down, but everyone learns them quickly. The message is clear. Keep your head down, your complaints quieter, and your mistakes invisible. Oddly enough, the line between promotion and punishment isn't always clear. Getting assigned to serve at a noble feast feels like a reward, until you realize one wrong move means hours scrubbing wine stains or apologizing to the lady's favorite hound. Some days, the greatest success is surviving unnoticed, not being called out for anything at all, and sneaking an extra crust of bread without anyone catching on. Despite it all, you keep hoping for a real promotion. Maybe one day you'll be trusted with the keys to the linen cupboard or, miracle of miracles, put in charge of the festival decorations. Until then, you navigate the unpredictable tides of castle hierarchy with a mixture of ambition, dread, and the grim satisfaction that, at least today, you're not the one assigned to goose duty. In the castle, your career path is more like a maze, with surprises, setbacks, and the occasional unexpected win. You take it one day at a time, one chore at a time, and hope that tomorrow your reward for surviving will be a warm meal and a slightly softer spot on the straw. Sometimes a traveling scribe writes a love letter on your behalf. It sounds beautiful, but the delivery goes wrong. The noble's wife finds it, and suddenly you're explaining poetry to a jury of angry chickens. In the world of medieval castles, the idea of courtly love is a romantic fever dream, one that's just as likely to get you into trouble as into anyone's heart. On rare occasions, when the stars align and the housekeeper isn't watching, you and your friends daydream about what it would be like to catch a noble's eye. You've heard the ballads, the wandering bards singing about knights pining for maidens and ladies bestowing silk handkerchiefs as tokens of affection. In reality, a peasant girl's handkerchief is more likely to be used to mop up spilled pottage than flutter from a castle window. But sometimes, fantasy sneaks in through the back door. The traveling scribe is an event in itself. He appears at the castle gates, hunched under the weight of his inkpots and battered parchments, promising letters for every occasion: love, apology, formal complaint. With enough coins, or a generous trade of bread and news, you can hire him to compose a message that will make even the most stone-hearted squire blush. He sits in the corner of the kitchen, quill flying as you whisper your hopes and wishes, careful not to let the cook overhear. The letter, once finished, is a thing of beauty. Words like radiant, divine, and more fair than dawn leap off the page. You practice reciting it, giggling with the other girls, imagining the look on the recipient's face. But this is where reality steps in, shoes muddy and confidence waning. Delivery is risky business. You can't just hand it over. What if someone sees? So you enlist the help of a kitchen boy or, heaven forbid, one of the stable lads, promising extra bread or a secret in exchange for a little discretion. Inevitably, something goes wrong. The wrong person finds the note. Maybe it's intercepted by the noble's wife, who, it turns out, can read perfectly well and has no sense of humor about love poetry addressed to her husband. Maybe it's dropped in the henhouse and found by the one maid who's more interested in gossip than in true love. Maybe it's handed to the squire, who can't read but is more than happy to perform a dramatic reading for the amusement of the entire staff dormitory. If you're truly unlucky, you end up in front of a makeshift tribunal, the head housekeeper, the cook, and, for some reason, a flock of disgruntled chickens who seem personally offended by the line about eyes brighter than spring's first blossom. You try to explain that it was all a joke, or a dare, or simply wishful thinking. No one believes you, but by next week, someone else will be at the center of a new scandal, and your moment in the spotlight will be mercifully forgotten. Despite the risk, the fantasy persists. There's a certain magic to it all. Writing down words you'd never dare say aloud, believing, if only for a moment, that you're living in a bard's song instead of a kitchen where onions are the most romantic thing on the menu. The letter may never reach its intended recipient, or if it does, may spark more confusion than courtship. But the thrill is in the trying. You tuck away a scrap of parchment, a snippet of rhyme, and return to your chores with a slightly lighter heart. In the end, courtly love is less about marriage proposals and more about daydreaming, an escape from the relentless routine of castle life. You learn to laugh at the disasters, share the stories with your friends, and keep writing letters, even if the only ones to read them are the chickens. After all, every girl needs a little fantasy, even if it comes with feathers, not flowers. Sometimes you think about leaving, joining a convent, running away with the traveling players, or marrying the miller's son. But honestly, the castle is its own strange family, and you're not sure where you'd find better stew. Dreaming of escape is practically a rite of passage for every pretty peasant girl in castle service. There are moments, usually when you're elbow deep in laundry or scrubbing the rushes for the third time that day, when you gaze out a narrow window and imagine another life. Maybe you could take vows, swap your tunic for a nun's habit, and spend your days in contemplative peace. At least the nuns get to sleep in real beds and eat cheese that isn't mostly vintage. Or maybe you'll run away with the next troupe of minstrels to pass through, living off applause and whatever you can collect in a hat. Who knows? The stage might be kinder than the kitchen. Then there's the classic fantasy, finding a sweetheart among the local lads. The miller's son has strong arms, a friendly grin, and, most importantly, access to actual flour. Compared to another season of goose attacks and midnight kitchen fires, it sounds almost romantic. You could imagine a life in a tidy cottage, maybe even with your own chicken that isn't plotting against you. But you've heard enough stories to know that happily ever after is mostly about who does the laundry. Yet for all the daydreams and whispered plans, the castle keeps pulling you back. It's noisy, drafty, and smells suspiciously like turnips most days. but it's also the only home you've known. There's comfort in the routine, in the nightly scramble for blankets, in the laughter over supper, even in the daily dramas about who left the door open or borrowed someone's apron without asking. You share everything here: work, misery, gossip, and the kind of friendships that only come from weathering disasters side by side. Leaving is never simple. Some girls are sent away, married off, given as servants to another household, or on rare occasions retired when they've grown too slow for the rush of castle life. Others make their own exit, slipping away with a secret bundle at dawn, or convincing the steward that their aging aunt in the next village desperately needs help. These stories ripple through the staff dormitory, equal parts warning and inspiration. For every successful escape, there are a dozen who left and found themselves missing the familiar chaos of castle walls. And then there are those who never leave. They become fixtures, older maids who know every crack in the stone, every ghost story, every hiding place for a spare crust of bread. They've survived fires, feasts, floods, and at least 3 head housekeepers. Their hands are worn. Their humor is sharper than ever. And their advice, whether you want it or not, keeps the next generation from making the same mistakes. In time, you realize you're picking up their habits, their favorite hiding spots, their knack for making even watery soup taste like comfort. You may spend years weighing your options, dreaming of life outside these walls, and plotting small acts of rebellion. But most nights, as you tuck your feet under your straw blanket and listen to the familiar sounds of snoring, wind, and the kitchen cat's midnight rampage, you remember why you stay. The castle is crowded, noisy, and frequently ridiculous. But it's also full of small kindnesses and shared history. Someday you might leave, by choice or by necessity. Until then, you settle for little escapes. A joke with a friend, a bite of forbidden fruit, a stolen hour in the Sunday. The world beyond the castle gates will always be waiting. But tonight, at least, you have warmth, company, and yes, probably the best stew you'll ever find. Everyone has opinions on what makes a pretty peasant girl. Freckles are either lucky or cursed. Pale skin is noble or sickly. And dimples might mean you're a witch. You realize quickly that the only opinion that really matters is your own, and maybe the cook's. Beauty in a medieval castle is a moving target, shifting with the mood of the nobles, the color of the season's turnips, and whatever scandal is making the rounds in the servants' hall. One day, you're admired for your rosy cheeks, proof that you're healthy, hard-working, and have somehow survived a winter without freezing. The next, someone's whispering that too much color in your face means you've been stealing wine from the Lord's table, or spending a little too much time with the stable boys. Pale skin is supposedly the height of nobility, a sign you don't work in the fields. But if you're too pale, the laundry mistress threatens you with extra broth and a lecture about the dangers of fainting near the kitchen fire. Then there are freckles. Some say they're kisses from the sun, little marks of luck and vitality. Others say they're evidence of a grandmother who once made a deal with the local wise woman. You might be considered charming in the morning and suspicious by evening, all depending on who's watching and who's gossiping. Dimples are a wild card. The priest claims they're a sign of a mischievous spirit. The housekeeper insists it's just muscle, and that you should be using those cheeks to smile more at the guests. Hair is another endless subject of debate. Fair-haired girls are sometimes called angelic, but just as often are blamed for attracting bad luck, as if their blonde strands might bring down a storm or two. Dark hair is considered mysterious, unless you're caught with it in disarray, in which case you're accused of hiding secrets or planning mischief. Red hair is rare and attracts the most attention. Some say it's a mark of beauty, others that it's a warning sign for trouble. Either way, You'll spend your entire adolescence trying to keep it clean with cold water and hope, while the noble ladies get fancy combs and lavender-scented oils. The pressure to be pretty is everywhere, but the standards are so confusing and contradictory that eventually you give up trying to keep track. The only constant is that your beauty is everyone's business. Noble women want you to look presentable but not too striking, wouldn't want you distracting the Lord's sons at supper. The older maids have advice on everything, from how to pinch your cheeks for color to how to hide a pimple with flour. You do your best, but sometimes it feels like you're just one errant sneeze away from being labeled unlucky for the whole season. Still, there are benefits to flying under the radar. If you're too pretty, you risk drawing the attention of bored nobles, jealous rivals, or well-meaning matchmakers who'd love nothing more than to marry you off to the local tanner. Not pretty enough, and you might get stuck with the worst chores, like cleaning the privies or wrangling the geese. The trick is to blend in, presentable, but not memorable. The medieval art of camouflage, beauty edition. And then there's the cook, whose opinion frankly carries more weight than all the noble ladies combined. Compliment her pies, help her with the heavy pots, and you'll always have an advocate. It doesn't matter if your hair is a mess or your cheeks are too red. If the cook likes you, you're golden. In the end, you learn that medieval beauty is mostly about survival. You adapt, you laugh at the nonsense, and you hold on to the rare moments when you catch your reflection in a bucket of water and think, not bad, considering. The real secret? Being tough, clever, and just a little bit stubborn. Because in a world obsessed with appearances, the prettiest thing you can be is still standing. Your day starts before sunrise in the depths of the kitchen, a place where hope, poultry, and knives go to die. The air is thick with the smell of burnt onions and the distant panic of undercooked pigeon. Pretty girls are often sent to garnish plates, but mostly you peel vegetables and learn which herbs can hide the taste of mystery meat. Spoiler: none of them. The castle kitchen is a world of its own. A smoky labyrinth where even the bravest peasant girl might lose her sense of time, hope, or eyebrows. You walk in bleary-eyed, clutching a dull knife and praying for an easy morning, only to be greeted by the cook's bellow and a countertop stacked with enough onions to make you weep for the future. If you're lucky, you start with root vegetables, potatoes, turnips, or whatever's rolling around under the table. If not, you're on poultry duty, plucking chickens so thoroughly you start to wonder if they ever had feathers in the first place. There's a clear hierarchy in the kitchen, and your pretty status doesn't earn you any special favors, except when the Lord's dinner needs a garnish, or someone has to carry the bread to the great hall and smile convincingly. Otherwise, your place is at the back table, where you chop, peel, and try to avoid the cook's rolling pin when she's in a mood, which is most days. You soon become an expert at separating edible from questionable, scraping the mold off cheese and picking out the good beans from the pile that looks suspiciously like last year's harvest. The culinary process is equal parts tradition and chaos. Recipes? More like vague guidelines passed down from someone's cousin's mother-in-law. The pottage pot is a cauldron of leftovers, constantly simmering, constantly evolving, and occasionally catching fire. Every morning, the kitchen staff play "What's That Smell?" betting on whether it's the stew, the bread, or something that crawled in overnight and gave up. Bread is baked daily, the aroma tantalizing, but beware. The crust could chip a tooth, and the inside is as dense as a winter cloak. Meat, when it appears, is cause for celebration and caution. You learn quickly that fresh is a relative term. The cook has tricks for masking the flavor of anything slightly past its prime. Handfuls of sage, parsley, or the ever-present onions. Your job is to pretend you can't tell the difference. Serve with a straight face and hope for the best. On feast days, you might even see exotic spices, pepper, cloves, maybe a hint of saffron, worth more than your annual wages, and used so sparingly that only the cook and her chosen assistant even know where they're kept. Danger lurks around every corner. Boiling cauldrons, sharp knives, slippery floors, and open flames ensure that no one gets through a week without a burn or a blister. There's an endless rush to serve the nobles while keeping enough food back for the staff to eat later. The unwritten rule is simple. Don't sample until the cook turns her back, and even then, chew quietly. The kitchen is also the social heart of the castle. Gossip, secrets, and arguments simmer as hot as the soup. While you peel and chop, you listen to tales of kitchen romances, noble scandals, and which staff member managed to sneak a sweetmeat from the Lord's table. Friendships are forged over flour sacks and frayed nerves. Rivalries flare and fade as quickly as the cook's temper. When the day ends, you're coated in flour, grease, and the unmistakable perfume of onions. Your feet ache, your hands are raw, but you've survived another round of culinary triumphs and tragedies. As you crawl back to the dormitory, you can't help but laugh at it all, because in the castle kitchen, every meal is a victory, every dish is a risk, and every day is a crash course in survival, teamwork, and the fine art of not burning the bread. Laundry day arrives with all the excitement of tax season. Hauling buckets to the freezing river, you discover that medieval stain removal involves sand, soapwort, and vigorous denial. The castle's laundry mistress inspects every tunic, and if you miss a spot, you'll hear about it for weeks, usually from someone who's never actually washed anything. Medieval laundry is not for the faint of heart or delicate of hand. It's a full-body workout, a test of your patience, and occasionally an exercise in creative storytelling. No, that's not soup on your sleeve, it's decorative dye. The day begins before dawn, with you and a handful of other girls wrestling mountains of soiled tunics, aprons, and sheets into rough piles. There's no laundry basket, just a strong back, and a prayer that the pile won't topple before you make it to the riverbank. The trek to the water is an adventure in itself, down steep stone steps, across muddy courtyards, past the kitchen where the cook shouts for someone to bring her more towels. Clean ones this time. The castle dog trails behind, ever, hopeful for scraps, or at least something interesting in the laundry pile. Once at the river, you're met by a morning mist and water so cold it could wake the dead. Gloves? Don't make me laugh. You plunge your hands in, teeth clenched, until your fingers go numb and your spirit threatens to follow. The medieval wash cycle is more wishful thinking than science. Forget soap, unless you count the precious lump of homemade lye or a fistful of mashed-up soapwort, which smells earthy and promises miracles but mostly makes your skin sting. For stubborn stains, you resort to sand, a smooth river rock, and, if all else fails, prayer and peer pressure. Scrub, slap, rinse, repeat. By the third tunic, you're soaked to the knees, arms aching, hair full of river spray, and wondering why anyone ever bothered to invent white linen. Of course, laundry day isn't just about getting clothes clean. It's prime gossip time. As you beat tunics against the rocks, you and the other girls trade the latest news. Who's sweet on the new page? Who got caught sneaking a honey cake? And which noble is rumoured to be running up debts in town? Every so often, you spot the castle's undermaid hiding at the edge of the group, helping by offering expert commentary and not much else. Then comes the inspection, the true test of your survival skills. The laundry mistress swoops in, eyes sharper than a sewing needle. She checks every hem and cuff, pokes suspicious stains, and sniffs for evidence of actual washing. If she finds a spot, what's this? Gravy, ink, alchemy. You're lectured in front of the group and assigned to rewash the whole load. There are stories of stains so stubborn they've survived 3 laundresses, 2 marriages, and an entire change in dynasty. Once everything is finally scrubbed and rinsed, it's time to hang the clothes to dry. You hope for sun, but more often than not, a rain cloud appears the minute the last tunic is up. The wind threatens to snatch your best work away, and you chase rogue undergarments across the castle yard, earning cheers and jeers from passing staff. When the clothes are finally dry, crunchy in winter, stiff as boards, and only vaguely less grimy, you gather them up, pray you haven't lost anyone's favorite shawl, and stagger back up the hill. Your hands are raw, your back is sore, and you're pretty sure you've aged a year in a single afternoon. But there's a strange satisfaction to it all. You swap stories about your worst laundry disasters, share stolen bits of bread, and laugh at the ridiculous stains you've seen and survived. Tomorrow, someone will spill something, and the cycle will start again. But for now, you're a survivor of rivers, rags, and relentless stains. And in the medieval castle, that's a victory all its own. The village fair is a riot of colour, questionable pies, and an even more questionable puppet show. You might get an afternoon free, which really means volunteering to help set up tables or fetch water for the dancing bear. By sundown, your feet hurt, your ears ring, and you're convinced that the juggler is wanted in 3 counties. A festival day is the closest you get to a holiday in the medieval world. Word of the fair spreads through the castle like wildfire. Someone hears the distant clatter of wagon wheels or spies a flutter of ribbons at the village edge. And suddenly, every servant is buzzing with anticipation. This is your moment to trade hard labor for harder labor, only with more music and the constant risk of eating something that will haunt you for days. On the morning of the fair, the castle empties out. Nobles go in full regalia, keen to show off silk sleeves and the latest jewelry. The rest of you scramble for your least worst tunic, maybe borrowing a shawl or pinching your cheeks for color. For a fleeting hour, everyone's equal crammed shoulder to shoulder in the crush at the village square, jostling for a glimpse of the festivities. Stalls line the road, draped in patchwork cloth and stacked with everything from fresh apples to clay whistles. You marvel at the dazzling chaos. Vendors hawk candied nuts and spiced cider. Dogs chase loose chickens. Children dart underfoot, and minstrels play a tune so lively it almost drowns out the cursing of the pie-eating contest. Someone hands you a tart so sticky you lose a tooth, and you decide that's part of the fun. Your afternoon off is quickly claimed by well-meaning supervisors. You help haul benches, pour cider, and deliver water to a bear on a chain, whose sad eyes and enormous paws make you want to set him free, until you remember you'd probably be the first one he'd hug. There's always a game to organize or a tent to raise, and just when you think you might sit and watch the puppet show, a noble's child demands to see the pretty girl from the castle, and you're back to dancing attendance, but with slightly more tinsel. Entertainment is a wild mix. Jugglers toss knives dangerously close to the crowd and each other. A magician makes eggs disappear, sometimes back into his own pockets, and there's a puppet show that manages to offend 3 families and a visiting priest before intermission. You laugh until you ache, share a cup of cider with friends, and marvel at the acrobats, before realizing one of them is definitely the runaway page from last winter. As the sun starts to sink, the music grows rowdier, the crowd rowdier still. Dances begin, circle reels, clapping games, and contests to see who can balance a bucket on their head while spinning. You might even get swept up in a line dance by the miller's son, or dared to race a goose down the lane. The goose always wins. For a few golden hours, you forget about castle chores, aching feet, and the ongoing war with the kitchen geese. But every party has its price. By nightfall, your hands are sticky, your hair full of confetti, and you've acquired both a questionable pie and a mysterious bruise. The trek back to the castle is slow, feet dragging, laughter echoing. You compare winnings, a wooden spoon, a wilted flower, a half-eaten cake, and stories. The juggler definitely had a warrant out for him, you're almost sure. The next day, you're back to scrubbing rushes and peeling onions, the magic of the fair already fading. Still, you'll spend weeks retelling the stories, humming the tunes, and debating whether the puppet show was genius or just slightly cursed. Festivals and fairs aren't a true day off, but for a moment, they let you taste freedom, mischief, and something dangerously close to joy. You wake up with a fever. Is it plague, bad soup, or just the universe's way of saying, slow down? The healer arrives with wild hair, mysterious vials, and a cure that tastes suspiciously like yesterday's ale. If that fails, you get a prayer, a poultice, and instructions to walk it off. You'd ask for a sick note, but literacy is rare, and so is sympathy. Falling ill in a medieval castle is an experience somewhere between existential dread and slapstick comedy. There's no such thing as a sick day. If you cough, the other girls scoot to the far side of the straw mattress, muttering about curses and bad humors. The laundry mistress threatens to throw your tunic out the window. Even the cat looks at you with suspicion. The first response is always to try to hide it. You down an extra mug of thin beer, pinch your cheeks for color, and hope no one notices you're shivering. But the castle is full of sharp-eyed supervisors. Someone will spot you slumping, sweating, or sneezing at the wrong moment. Suddenly, you're the center of a minor medical emergency. Enter the healer, part apothecary, part witch, and entirely unbothered by your dignity. She bustles in with her basket of roots and her hair full of twigs, talking to herself and poking at your forehead with cold, practiced fingers. Her diagnoses are never subtle. You're too hot, she proclaims, before producing a draught so foul you're sure it's punishment for some past life misdeed. It tastes like overcooked spinach mixed with pond water, and she stands over you until you drink every drop. The remedies range from oddly sensible, willow bark tea for aches, elderflower for fever, to deeply suspicious. Got a swelling? She's got a poultice for that, usually involving onions, goose grease, and a dirty bandage. Sprain your ankle? That's a job for a poultice and some muttered words that might be Latin or might be her shopping list. If all else fails, the answer is walk it off. If you can't, she'll prescribe bed rest. In the coldest corner of the dormitory, with only a thin blanket and the company of other invalids, the castle priest sometimes makes an appearance, armed with a candle and a prayer. He'll wave incense over your head and suggest that maybe you should confess your sins, just in case your illness is the result of a guilty conscience. There's always at least one old maid who blames it on the evil eye or last week's lunar eclipse. The young girls, meanwhile, watch you with a mix of pity and the hope that your chores will get reassigned, at least until you're well enough to swap horror stories. Minor injuries are handled in much the same way. A burn from the hearth earns you a slap of honey or lard and a stern warning to pay attention next time. Bruises from a goose attack? You're handed a cabbage leaf to wrap around your arm, which at least distracts the geese for a few minutes. Anything more serious? Broken bones, deep cuts, mysterious rashes, gets you a spot in the healer's ledger and a steady stream of curious visitors, all eager for news or a chance to practice their bedside manner. You look terrible, but at least you're not dead. Recovery is a group project, Friends sneak you bread or a sip of watered wine. The kitchen dog curls up at your feet, and the castle's endless noise becomes strangely comforting. But sympathy is fleeting. Once you're upright, you're expected to jump straight back into work, no matter how much you protest. In the medieval castle, wellness is less about feeling good and more about proving you're still useful. So you drink your potions, endure the prayers, and hobble back to the laundry yard, convinced that the real miracle isn't healing, it's surviving long enough to tell the tale. So, here we are, drifting gently to the end of another very long medieval day. A day of cracked hands, blistered feet, dubious pottage, and the relentless struggle to keep your dignity while sharing a bed with 3 other girls, a snoring dog, and the ever-present suspicion that someone just stole your only sock. If you've made it this far, surviving rushmat chores, sidestepping noble advances, dodging laundry disasters, and never quite getting the smell of turnips out of your hair, congratulations, you're tougher than boiled leather. Tonight, as you settle into your clean bed, maybe under a mountain of soft blankets, take a moment to remember just how wild daily survival used to be. Pretty peasant girls didn't have TikTok, they had turnip soup. They didn't have spa days, they had communal baths in water that looked like tea gone wrong. They endured freezing mornings, relentless chores, and a castle hierarchy more confusing than any office politics, all while trying to keep their hopes, and occasionally their dignity, intact. For every legendary beauty who caught the eye of a noble, there were hundreds more who found their greatest victories in snagging a warm spot by the fire or sneaking a second helping of bread. The resilience of those women is stitched invisibly into the modern world. The stubborn hope, the side-eye humor, and the ability to laugh at a disaster, even as it's happening. History may have dressed them up as damsels or background extras, but the truth is, they were the ones who kept everything running, even if they never got their own statue or song. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, maybe whisper a quiet thank you for running water, allergy medicine, and the miracle of privacy. Remember, every comfort you enjoy is built on the shoulders of people who endured far worse, and usually did it with a joke and a shrug. Sleep well, dream easy, and let the castle walls crumble into silence. The struggle is over for now. You've survived medieval bedtime, no lice, no leeches, and no midnight bread fights. Good night, and may your dreams be free of geese, gossip, and surprise turnips.